Well, what's on my mind this morning, listeners, is this state of emergency, the same issue cartooned in last May's cartoon, or depicted in last May's cartoon this morning. And I just have to say, thank goodness for people with sense, you know, who see the necessity of another state of emergency. As you're aware by now, listeners, an SOE has been declared in the three westernmost parishes, St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland, which have collectively become murder central in Jamaica. So as you know as well, the St. James SOE ended in January after the opposition foolishly withdrew support, but I'm glad that the government hasn't let that deter them from trying again, and not just trying again in St. James in particular, but extending it to the two neighboring parishes. Now, you guys know I'm a numbers person. I'm all about data and what data supports the stories that numbers tell. And the story out west coming out of the numbers is a dramatic one. Here, Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson break it down.
In 2018, there was a change. As you see, the parish of St. James now went down to 55, which meant that the parish of Westmoreland was the most murder-dense place in the country. Secondly was the parish of Hanover. If you look at what has happened since the beginning of 2019, you'll notice that Westmoreland is ahead, and this is so far. If you extrapolate these figures to the end of the year, where you see 29 will be about 90, and so on in those. So Westmoreland is now leading. St. James has gone up 70% over where it was last year at this point, and Hanover is still significantly high.
That's a huge increase, between 70 and 80% murders in St. James, after seeing a drastic reduction last year under the SOE, which saw homicides falling from a high of 335 in 2017 to 102 in 2018. The killings have just begun to surge again, with 49 victims recorded up to April 22. That was according to data released that particular week, and I know it's gone up to 50-something now. We also have this story on the front page of both newspapers. The 11-year-old girl killed in Hanover, another heart-wrenching story. Westmoreland, which has emerged as Western Jamaica's murder capital last year, since things were arrested in St. James for that period. Westmoreland recorded 141 murders in 2018 and 43 up to April 22 of this year. It's just maddening numbers. It's just mind-boggling numbers. And after hearing all of that, how can any right-thinking person oppose the enhanced security measures? I don't get it. I don't get how anyone can oppose it in the wake of all of that. And they tried to do it without the SOE. Yeah? And clearly it wasn't enough, even with the increased police presence. And I don't remember if you were co-hosting with me that morning when we had Dr. Horace Chang on, Kamisha. But he said on the show recently that they've actually put more police in St. James since the end of the SOE and expended more resources than they had during the SOE. And it still hasn't had the same effect, not even close to it. Here's that clip from Horace Chang.
They're still there. In fact, more is there now.
More police are there now than there were under the state of emergency?
Well, at some point, because we have sent in this special mobile squad from time to time, Justice the St. James Division, which is very active. And the two young officers in charge of security force down there, Superintendent Ellis and Major Anderson from the JDF, have cooperated and worked extremely hard in terms of keeping operations going, trying to suppress activity. The known killers are still on the street. We cannot remove them. They are aware of that. They're intelligent individuals. Crime is a business. They are business leaders, and they understand that they can effect their criminal activity and avoid the police and move on. State of emergency, you know who they are. They can detain them for some time. While they're detained, you get some evidence, you build cases.
You know, it's this thing that we haven't been able to reconcile. And I note a column from Ashley Ann Foster in the Observer this morning. She says the 2018 SOE statistics show two things of paramount importance that are yet to be reconciled, but which we must reconcile. One, that it led to a substantial decrease in murder, crime, and violence. That's a fact. And two, that the majority of detainees were released without charge. So we're not sure how to reconcile these two facts, but the two things are both true at the same time. And the more important of the two, in my opinion, is that it led to a substantial decrease in murder, crime, and violence. So clearly, the police presence enough, the saturation policing alone, isn't enough without the powers that come under a state of public emergency. They need to be able to round up these criminals, detain them, yes. And I'm going to take a page from George W. Bush. If you're not us, you're with the criminals.
If you're not with us, you're with them, man.
Yeah. And you have to keep in mind that we're talking about a life and death situation here. Statistics are not just numbers on paper, especially in this case. In this case, they represent actual human beings. So when we speak about a 70% increase in murders, we're talking about 50-something people dead in St. James. 50-something people who will never see another day. 50-something people whose lives have been snuffed out, whose entire potential has been erased from the face of the earth. Their earning potential, their human potential, their learning potential, whatever they may have contributed to society, that's been snuffed out. And we talk about 50-something families who are grieving, whose lives will never be the same, whose lives have been turned upside down. Some of these people were breadwinners with children and other family who depended on them. So those who cry about violation of human rights under the SOE, I ask, what human right is more sacrosanct than the right to life? Is it not that is to be protected at all cost? Because they talk about the Constitution. Well, this is the very first right in the Constitution, in the Charter of Rights, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof. It's the first right in the Constitution. That is the most important human right. All other rights ought to be considered secondary to protecting that one, because they're all moot, they're all irrelevant if we're not alive to enjoy the other human rights. So when the 14 days expire on May 14, which is right around the corner, 14 days is not a long time. I hope that the opposition does do the right thing and allow for an extension this time, because that it inevitably is going to be needed. There's no doubt about it that they're going to need an extension, because if they couldn't do it in a year, they certainly can't do it in 14 days. Yeah, so on May 14, on or before May 14, the Holness administration is going to have to go to Parliament to secure that 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate for an extension to the state of emergency in Westmoreland, Hanover, and St. James. And I hope sincerely that the opposition does the right thing this time around and allows for the state of public emergency to be extended, because we've already lost so much valuable time and valuable ground, lives that have been lost over the last 4 months as they play these political games. And we can't afford to go back to what was. That's what's on my mind.